Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today we put together a presentation about mindful eating. The Mediterranean and vegetarian eating patterns include recommendations about how we eat, not just about what we eat. So that's what we plan to tackle today. How can we slow down and introduce this idea of mindfulness around food? My name is Veronica, and I'm a registered dietitian. I'm co-presenting today with my registered dietitian colleague Fatim that I work with at the Toronto Rehabilitation Institute Cardiac Rehab program. Today's objectives are to understand the basic principles of mindful eating. We will discuss the 3 different types of hunger. We'll introduce the idea of analyzing your hunger on a hunger scale, and we'll end with discussing triggers to emotional eating. So what is mindful eating? I'm going to start the presentation off with a video. So it's a short video that can be found on our website. It's part of our Thrive series. So I'm going to plan to link to that now. I hope you can see that. This is the homepage of cardiaccollege.ca. And I'm sure you're aware of that because that's how you're accessing the presentation today. You want to hit this button here, which is the Thrive 12-Week Challenge. Hope that you visited this before. It does have 12 different videos, but today we're going to watch the one called Develop a Healthy Relationship with Food. And I'm going to play that now.
How often do you think about food? Do you notice the smell and taste of the food you are eating? Do you think about the way food makes you feel before and after you eat? For many people, the stress of eating the right food in the right amounts at the right time has made it hard to enjoy food. Wouldn't it be nice to enjoy food again? Eat without judgment? Have a better appreciation for food? You can. Mindful and intuitive eating can help you develop a healthy relationship with food. No rules, no diets, just eating to feel energized and be healthy. This weekly challenge will help you think about your relationship with food, your food choices, and your feelings when you eat. Then you can create an action plan to help you become a mindful and intuitive eater. The media shares a lot of information about diet and weight loss. You may have got the message over time that you shouldn't eat for pleasure. Maybe your doctor told you to lose weight. The problem with focusing on diets to lose weight is that it often doesn't work as a long-term solution. Diets are restrictive, and they often label food as either good or bad. Restricting food to follow a diet or lose weight can lead to undereating, overeating, and missing out on key nutrients. There is an emotional side to eating too. Trying to follow a strict diet can lead to feeling shame or guilt when you eat something outside your diet plan. It can also make dinner time a stressful event. Instead of following a long list of rules, try mindful eating. So, what is mindful eating? Mindful eating is when you take notice of all that surrounds you before, during, and after a meal. It's being in the moment and involves using all your senses: sight, smell, sound, taste, and touch when you eat. It means you are aware of your thoughts, feelings, and actions around food because you are fully present and paying attention when you are eating. It sounds easy, but eating mindfully takes a lot of practice. Over time, you might find that you start to notice details in the way food tastes, smells, and feels. Eating this way allows you to experience food in a new way. you can start to make a choice to eat certain foods, free of guilt and judgment, and let go of expectations for your body. You might find you are currently eating a lot of things you don't really even like, just because they are convenient, or because that's what you've always done. The next step is intuitive eating. It builds on the idea of mindful eating. Intuitive eating is eating in response to what you feel inside your body, eating when you are hungry, and stopping when you've had enough. It's about eating for the purpose of nourishing your body and getting energy from food. Think about the reasons you eat food. Is it because you're hungry? Or is it because the clock on the wall says you should? Before your next meal, ask yourself how hungry you are on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 means you are starving, and 10 means you're too full. Knowing how hungry you are can help you decide what kind and how much food to eat. Do you eat when you're bored, or do you eat socially? Which foods do you choose in which situations? And how do you feel after you eat? Are you feeling satisfied or bloated and tired? Happy and content? Or guilty and embarrassed? When you are aware of how your body and your emotions respond to certain foods, you will intuitively choose foods that make you feel better. That's intuitive eating. Mindful and intuitive eating is a long process with lots of learning along the way. If it's important to you to develop a healthy relationship with food, make an action plan to work towards this change. You might try one of the tips from this video or focus on something else this week. Remember, a small change to develop a healthy relationship with food is a big step closer to better health.
I hope you enjoyed that video. And I'll just ask you to take a moment to think about what you've learned from the video. Maybe was there something that just stood out for you? Was anything surprising? Is this a new concept? Was this the first time you heard about mindful eating or intuitive eating? So just think about that. Think about what you've learned from the video, and we'll build on that with the presentation today. There's actually a fantastic definition of mindful eating, which is displayed here on the screen, but I'll also read it out loud. This definition discusses the difference between the concept of mindfulness and the idea of mindful eating. So I'll start the quote here, which is, mindfulness is deliberately paying attention, being fully aware of what is happening both inside yourself, so in your body, your heart, and your mind, and outside yourself, so in your environment. Mindfulness is awareness without judgment or criticism. Now, mindful eating is an experience that engages all parts of us. It's our body, our heart, our mind, in choosing, preparing, and eating food. Mindful eating involves all of the senses. It immerses us in the colors, the textures, the scents, the tastes, and even the sounds of drinking and eating. It allows us to be curious and even playful as we investigate our response to food and our inner cues to hunger and satisfaction. There are 8 basic principles of mindful eating, which I'll go through now. The first is to be mindfully aware. So this means to change nothing at first, just be more aware. In order to raise our awareness, you want to try to make each bite a mindful bite. Use those senses, smell, feel, look, savor, and really taste your food. So think back to breakfast today. Did you do this? Just to become more aware will definitely increase the time it takes to consume your meal, but it will be for the better. So try to tune into all your senses to increase the enjoyment of each bite. Another principle is to observe your body. Before meals or snacks, just simply slow down. You can use a deep breath as an anchor to pull you back into the moment. So I'll invite you to take a deep breath with me now. Breathe in and out. See how that can actually slow you down. Maybe you could use this technique before you eat dinner tonight to observe your body and tune into that hunger level. The next principle is to shift out of autopilot. So whenever you eat, ask yourself, am I eating out of habit or hunger? This means you are making a conscious decision rather than going through the motions. Does this sound familiar? Can anyone relate to this? I know I can. A lot of the time I catch myself eating because of habit. I get up in the morning and I make some oatmeal, but did I ask myself, am I hungry? Did I ask myself, how hungry am I, to determine how much that I was going to eat? No, I just went through the motions because it's time for breakfast. So it's something to consider for your next meal. Think about, are you eating for habit or hunger? The next principle is to be mindful of the environment. So you can notice how your eating habit shifts from place to place. If you put healthy foods in a highly visible place, like having a fruit bowl on your counter or perhaps chopped up vegetables in a clear bowl in your refrigerator, does this increase the chance that you'll reach for a healthier snack when you're hungry? Quite likely. Mindful eating also means to be in the moment. So try to avoid multitasking when we eat. Turn off the TV, put down the magazine or your cell phone, and just eat. Keep your mind at the table and try to be in the moment. You want to try to practice non-judgment when you're mindfully eating. So you want to speak mindfully. You want to be aware of critical thoughts about your habits or your body. You want to try to move away from those rigid food rules and use your mindful instincts. So food isn't good or bad, it's just food. So why are we so critical of ourselves? We know that all foods can fit, but it's about moderation. So try not to judge yourself for eating certain things. Simply be aware of your actions and then move on. Let go of expectations of your body. Try to work on letting hurtful thoughts and emotional urges to eat go by without reacting to them. Respond rather than react to food cravings. The fact that you have a thought, a feeling, or craving doesn't mean that you have to act on it. Try to just be aware and respond. And finally, the last principle is to practice acceptance. So trying to adopt an attitude of it is what it is. When you accept your body and hunger as it is, you stop punishing yourself with starvation diets and you no longer stew about the problem. So start to notice, when you're dwelling and start taking action by just accepting the moment as it is. So those were the 8 principles of mindful eating that are actually summed up really nicely on this graphic here by Dr. Susan Albers. Something that you could find on the internet and simply print it off. You could put it on your fridge for a reference to just become more mindful when you're eating. This picture reminds us to be aware of tasting our food, being present instead of mindlessly munching. It suggests to savor our food, to notice the texture, the aroma, the flavor. Is it crunchy? Is it sweet? Is it salty or smooth? It asks us to observe our body. Maybe it's your rumbling stomach. Maybe you have low energy. Perhaps you are stressed out or you're satisfied. Try to observe how you're feeling and then respond accordingly. It asks you to be in the moment, to be fully present. So that's again to turn off the TV, to try to sit at the table when you're eating and just eat. And finally, this picture reminds us to be non-judgmental. This is probably the hardest part of for a lot of my clients. They've been judging themselves for years and years and years, so it's quite different to try to be non-judgmental. Try to start by speaking mindfully and compassionately about oneself. Notice when guilt pops up into your mind, and then remember to let it go instead of judging yourself. Moving on, there's 3 types of hunger. that we're going to go over today. The first one is called stomach hunger. Stomach hunger is the type of hunger we're all aware of. It's described as the physical or medical necessity to eat. And this is when you hear your stomach growling. It's asking for nourishment. Mouth hunger is a craving related to senses. So if you've eaten a meal or snack recently, but you feel the desire to eat, take the time to explore what exactly you're craving. Is it a particular food? Is it something savory, sweet, maybe something cold or warm? Once you have identified your craving, you can eat a reasonable portion of it and savor each bite to satisfy this mouth hunger. And then there's something called heart hunger. Now this is an emotional trigger or a learned behavior. Again, if you've recently eaten, but still find yourself back in the kitchen, slow down and ask yourself, what are you feeling? It's completely normal to eat when you're sad or stressed. However, food only temporarily blunts the emotion you're experiencing, only for that emotion to reappear. So this is the time to look into the toolbox for, your own toolbox, I should say, for other stress management activities that can help you soothe and nurture yourself without food. Slowing down and practicing mindful eating allows us to assess which type of hunger we are experiencing. Chewing our food well, eating distraction-free will help us become more aware about how we're feeling. You can then assess, is it true stomach hunger? Maybe you need to pick up the phone and chat with a friend to satisfy your heart hunger. Or perhaps it's to drink a warm cup of tea to satisfy your mouth hunger. Slowing down, becoming more aware of yourself and your environment will help you determine what you need to feel satisfied. So now I'm going to pass this over to Fatim to continue our discussion.
Thanks, Veronica. So we've learned that hunger is a natural sensation and we shouldn't ignore it. The hunger scale is a tool that encourages you to pay attention to your body and what it's telling you. It's a way to tell whether you physically should eat and when you're satisfied and full. So let's take a moment now. Just take a moment and focus your attention to your stomach. Try not to think about what time of day it is or when you had your last meal. Just pay attention to how your stomach is feeling right at this present moment. And then take a look at this hunger scale. Where do you feel on the hunger scale? Are you in the middle, around 5, 6, or 7, where you feel satisfied? Or maybe you haven't eaten this morning and you're hungry and you're at a lower number, like 1 or 2. Maybe you've just eaten and you're full and at a higher number, like 8 or 9. Most people enjoy their food and feel comfortable when they're between a 4 and an 8. If you ignore your hunger signals or skip meals, you can go to a 1 or 2. At this point, you might start to feel jittery or irritable. That's when we get that hangry feeling. At this point, you'll likely feel like eating everything in sight, and it's much harder to plan a healthy meal. On the other hand, if you've eaten to the point of satisfaction, but you continue eating because it tastes great, or because your mind is telling you to keep eating for other emotional reasons, you can end up at a 9 or a 10 where you physically feel uncomfortable. So this is a great tool to use to keep track of your physical hunger. So instead of eating on autopilot or according to a rigid time schedule or what the clock is telling you, use the hunger scale before, during, and after you eat. It can be one of the tools to help you eat more intuitively. Now, if we go on and we talk about triggers, just let's take a moment first to think about all the reasons we eat. Veronica mentioned the types of hunger, but think about why we eat. And if you want, you can type it into the chat box. So I'll give you a minute to think about why we eat. So as you can see, we eat for many reasons. We eat out of hunger, our body's needs, for energy. We eat for nutrition and getting all the nutrients our body needs. But we also eat for pleasure. We eat to celebrate. We eat for stress relief. Sometimes we eat out of boredom or sadness. Sometimes we eat because it's lunchtime or the time of day. Sometimes we're told to eat, especially as children. And sometimes we eat just because the food is there and it's right in front of us. There are so many different reasons for eating, and each of these reasons can be heart hunger, mouth hunger, or stomach hunger. Now let's talk about triggers. So a trigger is defined as anything that serves as a stimulus and initiates a reaction or a series of reactions. A trigger can be anything we see, hear, smell, touch, taste, or feel that evokes an emotional response. A physical trigger can be people, sights, sounds, and smells. It can be brought on by watching someone else eat, watching a food commercial, or smelling the aroma of something like fresh baking. It can also be a body signal, like feeling hungry, tired, feeling full, or experiencing a low blood sugar. When we look at mental triggers, these can be our thoughts, and emotional triggers can be feelings or memories. Awareness of a trigger doesn't always mean that food is needed. Sometimes it means just that something is happening, and that's where you want to take a pause and explore your emotional state. What can you do to make yourself feel better? Common triggers to emotional eating include things like stress, loneliness, boredom, lack of control. And I think for a lot of us, these are very real feelings, especially when we're isolated during COVID-19. When you do feel these emotions, take a pause, explore why you're feeling them, what can you do to make them better without reaching for food. Because as Veronica mentioned, food is just a temporary fix. It's not really getting at alleviating the real issue. Now, we grow up being comforted by food from the time that we're babies. Food is often readily available, and eating is a quick way to comfort or nurture ourselves. When we're stressed, we often turn to food to give us a break or a reward or a pick-me-up. Food is always comforting, but we want to try to get away from always using food just to comfort us. And we need to work on finding other ways of reducing the stressors in our life, and also to replace eating with other simple, pleasurable activities that you can do to comfort yourself, reward yourself, or even re-energize yourself. So you might curl up with a book or watch a show online, listen to a soothing podcast or music. You might take a bath or call a friend, play with your pet, or go for a walk. Or just right now, in this great weather, just go out into your garden and just enjoy nature. Once we get past this period of self-isolation, you can think of other things to nurture yourself. You might go for a massage, or browse in a bookstore, or even go window shopping. Everyone is different, and you want to find things that you can do for yourself that don't always involve food. So maybe take a moment right now and think of one or two ways that you can nurture yourself in the coming week. And I'll just end off with some resources. So Veronica and I have given you just a taste of mindful eating. It is quite a long process, and it's not something that you can do overnight, but take small steps. Start with the awareness piece and just be aware of how your body is feeling and why you're eating. There are some great websites that you can refer to. There's one called Am I Hungry? About eating mindfully. There's the Center for Mindful Eating, which has some great resources and handouts you can download. We have the Ellen Satter Institute. And Ellen Satter is a dietitian who deals with mindful and intuitive eating at all stages of life, from toddlers to children to adults. She has some great resources and books on her website. There are two books that Veronica and I like to use. One is called Mindful Eating by Jan Chosen Bays. This one also comes with a CD, and it goes through some mindful eating exercises to help you practice. And the second one is by Susan Albers, called Eat, Drink, and Be Mindful. And both of these books are available online through Amazon or Indigo. So, if you are interested, they're good reads.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I do see two questions that have come in. So if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to use that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen to type in any questions you have. I'll start, I guess. So one of the questions that came in reads, is icing sugar okay for heart and diabetes? So when I read this question, icing sugar is something that we classify as an added sugar. Added sugars don't have a lot of nutrients, but they definitely can have a place in our eating pattern. That could be white sugar, brown sugar, honey, molasses, icing sugar. So lots of different options there. The American Heart Association, as well as Diabetes Canada, have recommended that we limit the amount of added sugar we have. So about the guidelines that they recommend are no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar for women. And so there is some room there in your eating pattern that you can include this if you wanted. So I guess it's up to you what kind of added sugar you want to include. If it's icing sugar, yes, there is some room in your eating pattern to include it, and it will be okay for both your heart and if you are living with diabetes. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Another question has come in, which is the best lactose-free yogurt? And I think for a lot of people, lactose is an issue. And if you are lactose intolerant, eating regular yogurt or drinking milk can be quite uncomfortable. In terms of lactose-free yogurts on the market, there are quite a few. My son is lactose intolerant, so we're always looking for a lactose-free yogurt. I know Astro, Danone, Liberty all have lactose-free versions. I think the key is when you are choosing a yogurt, think back to the sugar that Veronica just talked about. So you want to choose one that's maybe an unflavored or unsweetened yogurt rather than one that has a lot of added sugar. Lactose is a natural sugar occurring in milk, so we're not too worried about lactose or the lactose-free yogurts where the lactose is partly digested already. But we don't want too much added sugar, so maybe choose a plain yogurt and then add your own fruit or toppings to make it flavorful. If you look on the Cardiac College website under the Eat Healthy section, we have some short videos on choosing healthy foods in the grocery store, and there's actually a video on choosing a healthy yogurt, so you might want to check that out as well.
So another question here reads, how do you eat mindfully when you're eating with others? So I think this is a wonderful question. It definitely would be difficult or more difficult to eat mindfully with others. You don't have to eat mindfully, with every meal or snack. The more we practice it, the better we will become. So, lots of different ways come to mind right now, but I'm sure you could experiment to see what works for you. Sometimes even when you're cheersing before you eat, or if you have a prayer before you eat, that's a chance to just reflect on the meal itself, where the foods come from, who's made the food. maybe discuss some different types of cooking techniques of the food. That's an area to look at food a little bit differently. Or you could even have these conversations while you're eating, so that you invite other people to eat mindfully with you and share your experiences together. I think too, eating with others is wonderful, because it just takes a lot more time to eat, and you enjoy the food a lot more, because you just spend time chatting, and it's, you just, I don't know, I'm losing my train of thought. You're just engaged with not only the people around you, but the food itself. So I guess what I'm trying to say is to bring that food into the conversation. And like I said at the beginning too, you don't have to eat mindfully at each meal, but that could be a nice way to invite others to engage in this activity with you.
And just to add, also I love everything Veronica mentioned. If you even have a moment before the meal, you could still do a little check-in with yourself, just to see where you are on the hunger scale. So practicing a little bit of that intuitive eating, and that could still help you decide what you choose to eat in that social setting and how much. Check in maybe midway through the meal with yourself, and again at the end, and that might help you decide how much you want to eat, even in that social setting. But as Veronica mentioned, eating socially is a big component of a healthy diet, and you don't always have to be mindfully eating with each meal.
Great, thanks, Sam.
Thanks. Okay, another question. What should be the daily consumption of skim milk in a day for seniors? Okay, so it's a question we often get around milk and milk products. Veronica and I actually talked about this last week when we talked about some myths around milk. I think milk is a great source of calcium, and when we look at calcium needs for an older adult, it's between 1,000 and 1,200 milligrams a day. A glass of milk will give you about 300 milligrams. But you can also get calcium from other dairy foods like yogurt and low-fat cheeses. So you want to take a look at overall what you're eating, and then incorporate, I would say on average about 3 servings of milk or alternatives a day is a good goal. And that's in line with the Mediterranean diet, and also the DASH or dietary approaches to stop hypertension diet that we've been recommending.
Awesome. And then there's another question here. How can I replace my habit of eating cookies regularly with morning and afternoon tea time? So I guess that's when I would challenge you to think about, are you eating the cookies for hunger or habit? And just really, so when you are sitting down with your tea, trying to, as Sam mentioned, maybe rate your hunger level to see how hungry you are on the hunger scale. And then you can also question what type of food you think will help fuel you at that moment in time. So like I said, sometimes you're eating out of habit for these cookies, as you mentioned. So thinking, just trying to stop yourself, maybe have that big deep breath to try to center yourself, to tune into how you're feeling and what you think would be a better maybe option for a snack that will help keep you full longer. Or perhaps you do need those cookies at that time, right? So it's kind of something that I would ask you to work on and ask yourself those questions every time you do pour yourself that tea. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Lisa here. I actually have a question for you. And this example could actually go both ways. During the pandemic, do you have any additional tips or ideas for people who either are eating more because they're bored with the pandemic, or in my case, I find I'm a new mom, plus I'm working and having to figure out the childcare and all this during the pandemic. So I find I'm eating on the go all of the time and just kind of grabbing whatever is right there. And I know you talked about some of these things in the presentation, but any additional tips and whatnot during the pandemic to really help with the additional stress and whatnot associated with the pandemic?
Well, I guess I can start. I am also a new mom who is eating a lot on the go and doing 1,000 things at once. So I understand that challenge. What I have been trying to practice is, my son does have to eat too. So when he's eating, I'm trying to slow down and eat with him as well, instead of multitasking and trying to be with him. I also don't, put too much pressure on myself, because this is a unique time, and I have to, be kind and just let myself know that it is okay to eat on the go, because I have all these commitments, and I do have things that need to be done, and I do know, or I do hope that things will slow down eventually, and then I can reconnect and practice mindful eating then.
I'm happy to add in as well. I think that as Veronica kind of mentioned, practicing maybe a bit of that non-judgment. So being aware of your own critical thoughts. It's a very tough and stressful time for so many different reasons for a lot of different people, especially if you're trying to manage your health concerns, as well as this, social and physical distancing, and times have really changed. So trying to be non-judgmental and knowing that, the next meal is a new opportunity to practice these habits. And if possible, be mindful of your environment. Can you make it a little easier to have a healthy, nutritious snack available? So I know in the presentation, Veronica and Fatim mentioned having like a fruit bowl handy. So ways to just make it a little bit easier to maybe make some healthier choices, but also being non-judgmental to yourself and giving yourself a little less of that criticism if possible.
Yeah, I agree with both of those. I think, especially during this time, some self-compassion is important, and just knowing that it is a stressful time, and we deal with it differently, and we're doing the best we can. So I think that's important. And as Sam mentioned, just keeping some healthy options around. If you do open the fridge and it's filled with good stuff, it's a lot easier to reach for that.
And so just a couple of announcements before we finish for the day. First of all, I would very much like to thank our dietitians for being with us today, for pre-recording their presentation and then joining us live for questions. We very much appreciate that. And I can't remember, Veronica, you might be able to remember, we do have you guys coming back in July for another talk, and we're very much looking forward to that. So stay tuned for announcements about that.
Yeah, I can't remember the date, but I know it's at the end of July.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Looking forward to it.
Yes, thank you very much for today's presentation. We will not be having a Women with Heart online session next week. With Canada Day happening right around then, we figured people might be taking a long weekend. And so we will be back on Tuesday, July 7th at 10 a.m. for another one of our live exercise classes. And this one will be focusing on working with resistance bands. And one of our cardiac rehab supervisors, Maria Yuyatung, will be leading this class. And so we're very excited for that. So no Women with Heart online next week, but we will see you on Tuesday, July 7th. So thank you very much for joining today, and have a wonderful 2 weeks. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you. Bye-bye.